To pray for all rulers and for the peaceful ordering of the nations, that men may serve God and one another in freedom and with justice, and to dedicate ourselves anew to his service.
With all this in mind, what are we to say? If God is on our side, who is against us? He did not spare his own son, but surrendered him for us all. And with this gift, how can he fail to lavish upon us all he has to give? Who will be the accuser of God's chosen ones? It is God who pronounces acquittal. Then who can condemn? It is Christ, Christ who died, and more than that, was raised from the dead, who is at God's right hand, and indeed pleads our cause.
Next week's Saturday special starts at the new time once again of 15:15. 15:15, when we'll have rugby league, rugby union, racing, and England from football from England and Scotland. Until 15:15, goodbye.
Harry Feeney, my word, you can't see him for dust. Well, a 9-minute bulletin of world news follows, and then we have Letter from London. And whilst Africa and Europe have alternative programs, we'll have Wally Whiten's Folk Country. This is London.
Could I just say that everybody who is free would be welcome to come to the Consulate General to have a drink with us now. It's all right. I've got my skin left on it.
Hello. How are you? Fine, thanks. How are you now? Same place.
Yes, we're still in Arcon.
Looking close to you.
No, I say we fixed up a one-way valve between us and our landladies, the other sisters. So the odour of sanctity doesn't equally the odour of unsanctity doesn't pollute the dear sisters. See?
I thought it would. No, we only tried it right out, but I think having an electric fire on in the evening dries the air and it doesn't matter.
We roar with laughter when we see each other.
He's the one that roars. I've never seen him.
One thing I'm sure, to be a soldier, you have to be right here. It's great to be between these guys here and everybody here in this country. When it comes to time like this, everybody, it's like just like one big family, one big family. You can't even call it war machine, you know, just one family. Everybody do everything for everybody and you just feel safe. And everybody knows if something happened to him, he'll never stay on the field. Always someone would take him back and
Yeah.
They'll do everything to save him. You can't fight just because someone told you to fight, you know. You have to fight because we can't lose.
The hatred which we indoctrinate into the minds of our children from their birth is sacred. From a letter sent by the Syrian Minister of Education, Suleiman Al-Kash, to René Mo, Director General of UNESCO, Damascus, May 3rd, 1968. There is the Egyptian state seal, the Minister of Education and Instruction, the first year junior high school. A grammar exercise. The Arabs do not cease to act for the extermination of Israel. The Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Minister of Education and Instruction, Modern History, the third year junior high school. The Jews in Europe were persecuted and despised because of their corruption, meanness, and treachery. Page 150. Copyright reserved to the Minister of Education and Instruction, Syria. The Religious Ordinance, Reda, for second year junior high school. The Jews are scattered to the ends of the earth, where they lived exiled and despised, since by their nature they are ill, greedy, and enemies of mankind. By their nature they are tempting to steal a land as asylum for their disgrace. Page 138. The Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Ministry of Education and Instruction, Department for School Curriculum and Textbooks, Islamic Teaching, for the fifth year junior school. It is the obligation of the Muslims to guard this holy land and not to let the Jews stay in any part of the country, since it is holy for the Muslims. Page 53. Egypt, the Minister of Education and Instruction, for third year junior high school. And every Jew who committed a crime somewhere and wished to escape from the hands of the law hurried to Palestine. Salam said, "Are not the Jews who stole our land the scum of the nations with nothing common between them?" Page 15. United Arab Republic, Minister of Education and Instruction, high school reader, the third year high school. O Mother Israel, dry your tears. Your children's blood, which is being spilled in the desert, will produce a thorn wormwood. Wipe off your blood, O Mother Israel. Have mercy and spare the desert, your filthy blood. Let every house be the wailing wall of the Jews.
People swore here that it will never happen again, that we will not be slaughtered. And the Arabs for many years said that they're going to throw us into the sea. When people say throwing into the sea, people have, the Jews have an inner ear, and the inner ear has memories, and the memories is Auschwitz. And Auschwitz can never happen again because Israel is the answer to Auschwitz. like maybe Zionism is the answer to God. I mean, don't forget that Zionism is rebellions against the God of Israel. People don't understand it very well. Therefore, people use all kind of religious expression in Israel in an obscure way, because religion, to be a real Jew, is to live in a paradox. How come, where is this God of Israel? Where was the God of Israel in the 2,000 years of suffering? So the complex of Auschwitz is very strong here, and when Nasser has had moved forces in Sinai, people saw Auschwitz. And even now, when Sadat said he's going to take over the territory, people saw Auschwitz. And it's understandable. There are many people here who either come or they are sons of people who came from Auschwitz, and this is one of the strongest undercurrent of this country. But I think that because of that, we should also have the other side of Auschwitz, which is survival, which is that to live is to live, which is to find some solution to the problem so we can somehow live and not perish. And I'm talking about the Holocaust because it has so much. I mean, in 1948 there were 500,000 people, and then within a year or so, about 750,000 Jews from refugee camps and so on came, and they gave a certain kind of stamp on Israel. But it's not seen on the surface. It's only, I feel it only as the underneath nightmare. And I think every time there is a war, people get apocalyptic. People get into a feeling that this is Auschwitz, and now we're going to. And this time, in this war, it was almost so. Unlike the Six-Day War, where people felt it, but then we were ready and fought. This time, we were caught with our pants down, and so. And the beginning was like that. The Jews lived for years with a messianic idea that there will be a Messiah that will take the children of Israel and bring them to the Promised Land. And once you go against that, you go against the whole essence of Judaism. Essence of Judaism was to live where they are and to make it better and to hope to come to Israel, but you not just come to Israel. Israel should be given to you by that God of... And any Messiah that came along was a false Messiah. But of course, all the Messiahs that proclaimed to be Messiah, like Shabtai Tzvi or people like that, were of course taken out of Judaism and put away. And I think Zionism is in a way sort of a lightened reflex of Shabtaim, of Hasidim and all that. In fact, all the anti-halakha movement in the history of Judaism were leaning towards Eretz Israel, and all the halakha was always against. I mean, when my grandfather went to Israel in the beginning of the century or the end of the last century, his father was saying that this is a sin to do that. I mean, you go there either to die on Mount Olive or you have to wait. And Zionism was like that. It took a lot of beautiful things out of Judaism and merged it into Tolstoyan song and dance and into early beautiful socialist ideas and mingled it all together into something that was supposed to create a new society here, which it did. It was amazing what these pioneers or these founding fathers did. But then they got into a Greek tragedy without knowing. The Jews know drama, they don't know tragedy. I mean, and here they were in a tragedy. They came to claim this land that was promised to them by people who believed in God, and they didn't. And then they found Arabs living here, and of course the Arabs has all the rights to be here. They lived here for 2,000 years, and we came and tell them, look, you have many countries, why don't you live there? But they said, look, we live in Nablus, we want to live in Nablus. We live in Jerusalem for 1,500 years, we want to live in Jerusalem for 1,500 years. So we said to them, look, but you have Damascus, and you have empty deserts, and you have, and so it didn't work out. So it became like a tragedy. We were right, and they were right, and we fought and fought and fought. So the end of it, either a Masada where one destroyed the other, or that we live in some sort of a compromise. we're really a nuisance in this world. I mean, we want to be rational people. We come from the West, you know, we have Western technology and Western ideas, and we came to reclaim a country for what? Because God promised this country 2,000 or 3,000 or 5,000 years to Abraham. It's very stupid. I mean, how can you take it rationally? I mean, my grandfather came to Palestine in 1900, and he was quite an intelligent man. Now, he came because God promised some old Arab, I don't know, with a kafir 5,000 years ago, that this will be his country. But in the meantime, Arabs were living here, and the Christians were living here, and the Romans were living here. And here the Jews came to reclaim a country. There, you don't just come to reclaim a country. You come to reclaim a country because you have a deed. Now, the deed is a mystical deed. It's a ridiculous deed. I mean, it's not a rational deed. A nice American Jew come to Israel with Harvard education because Abraham was promised this land. Otherwise, why should he come here? Why doesn't he live in New York? I mean, New York is a nice place for Jews.
قال إن هذه الحالة ستنتهي تدريجيا.
You know, someone said once that the revolution of 1905 in Russia failed in Russia and succeeded in Israel. Because there is a difference between the 1905 revolution and the 1917. And after all, the revolutionaries of 1905, the fighters for this, many of them were Jews, young Jews, who were disillusioned by the anti-Semitic events afterwards and came to Israel, and that was the second Aliyah that in fact made this country. I mean, because the first Aliyah was more or less, they were going to do something like Algeria here. I mean, with exception, of course, but second Aliyah came with this, there were the hippies, there were like a bunch of hippies coming here, living together and thinking in socialism in a very, but they created a very powerful system, you know, and they've been in control of this country since the 30s in a very strange system. On one hand, it's a democracy. And it is a democracy. One can say whatever he wants in this country. You're allowed to speak, and you're allowed to make fun, and you're allowed to criticize, and you're allowed to satirize. And yet, they're not changing government. Voting is always about the same. The government don't change. I mean, of course, premiers change and all that, but the same party has been in control since 1933 or so. I mean, before the state even, and then Ben-Gurion and after that. Well, there was a great, real change in after the 6 Day War. And from the 6 Day War till last war, it was like 100 years in another country's life. I mean, we became much more consuming country. People got richer, people built villas, people, and so they got very secure and feeling stronger and richer, and people got bigger cars. I mean, it was very much like America in the 50s. People became very unconcerned about other people's suffering, other people's plights. I mean, this whole socialism of the country went out the window. So much money was available and so much development. I think that this war, it put an end to it in some strange way, because people are now going to evaluate things more seriously. There will not be so much money. People will have to pay for this war. This war was not only in life, but in money. It cost a lot, and we'll have to pay for it. So there will be an austerity in some way, and it will be good for us, because Israel used to be a very unique place 30 years ago, as culture is concerned, with compassion and feeling for others, and we were one family. And in the 6 years between the wars, it all went out the window because of many reasons that is not the time to describe it. But now the shock, the people are in shock. The whole country is in shock, and this shock will have a therapeutic effect on what's going to happen. And this big consuming society of the last 6 years it was all based on nothing. It was all built on chicken legs, and so this whole base has been taken away. With cheap Arab war coming from the territories and with the great dreams about empire and all that. All this thing is over.
I was born in Israel, and so were both my parents. My family has been here for about 100 years now. I have not witnessed the first clash between the Arabs and the Jews in Israel, which happened in 1920 to 21. But I've had my parents tell me stories of this first onslaught, which took the Jewish population by surprise, mostly attacks in the cities at the time. That's when Jewish self-defense got organized, 1920 to 21. I do remember as a kid the pictures of the dead in the 1929 second Arab onslaught on us. This is when, for instance, the population of Jewish Hebron was massacred, and the city was abandoned after that. It was a city which had a Jewish population for perhaps 1,000 years, and it was abandoned in 1929. Then as a kid, I helped carry messages during the 1936 to 39 troubles, which were called the Arab Rebellion. And I participated actively in the field in the War of Independence, 1947-48. Since then, I also took part in the war of 1956, and of course in the one of 1967. And so my count does not have this one as the fourth Arab-Israeli war. I think it's been going on for much longer than that. And we've had at least 50 years of an active military clash with the Arabs, which has this periodic nature with the length of the periods corresponding to the time it took the other side to forget about the previous defeat and try it again.
The gap was never as great as you made it to be. For how could it be explained, this remarkable efficiency and ability which Egyptians have displayed in operating missile networks which have paralyzed the efficiency of Israel's pilots? Your basic fault lay in your confusing between a civilization which declines and emerges at one time or another, and a civilization which constitutes a heritage which impregnates the behavior of a people and which is sustained throughout history. But whatever the results, although these have begun to emerge in this ferocious, long and bitter war, just as your leaders have predicted it would be, the battles have proved that the strikes of the Israeli army do not help to restore neither the future of Israel, its security, nor the guarantees of its future. For true guarantees lay in that Israel's existence should rest on new relationships with the countries of the area, first and foremost.
If you think that the Egyptians had planned that for 4.5 years, this particular attack, and they trained it many times, and they crossed this canal on a make-believe canal, I don't know how many hundreds of times, and they got so much gunpowder, and it had to work. The masses that they threw in, you know, the 100,000 soldiers that crossed the canal within 12 hours. Do you know how many tanks attacked Russia? The Germans had 1,400 tanks. There were 1,400 tanks only in Syria, and there were about 1,200 or 1,300, attacking in Egypt. It was the combined force of both Russia and Germany in the Second World War. And it didn't work out, and they know it.
Security, then, is not in becoming stooges to the U.S., but in grasping the spirit of adjustment to the age and to the place. Security, therefore, does not play in negating the existence of the Palestinian people, who are now living just as you did a period of diaspora. Once again, you ask Israeli youth and the forces of peace and enlightenment in Israel, what are you fighting for? The age of colonialism and expansion is past and gone, and as watchdogs of U.S. interests in the world, there is nothing you can reap except devastation and youth genocide, and another war in the area every few years. So what are you fighting for? From the Hebrew service of Radio Cairo, you have just been listening to For What Purpose Are You Fighting? You are tuned to the Hebrew service of Radio Cairo. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we bring you some songs.
So I criticize, other people criticize, we were a small minority that criticized the government after the Six-Day War, and even before, but especially since the Six-Day War. They said, look, there was a great victory. The Arabs were humiliated, and when you're strong, you can be compassionate and also can be generous. When you're strong, it's a good time to be generous, and one should make then a plan what Israel is needs for security and for living in peace, and come and suggested it. Of course, a lot of people say, so what, the Arabs want to destroy you, and the Arabs will never accept it, but still, we didn't really go into it. The government was living on sort of a beautiful status quo thing. I mean, not to do anything is better than to do, and in the meantime, they did quite a lot of things that were harmful. In the meantime, the Arabs, of course, were licking the wounds and waiting for a revenge, and the revenge came on Yom Kippur. People like us, we expected that thing will happen. We didn't expect that the army will not be as ready as it should be. We didn't expect that in the first 2 or 3 days the Arabs will be so, successful, maybe. But I think that the fact that they were so successful is also part of how we deceived ourselves about them, and how we deceived ourselves about our strength and our power, and how unbeatable we are. So, of course, at the end it was a victory, and we almost won the war. But now again is a situation in which peace can be achieved, but who will achieve it? I don't know if Golda and Dayan are able now to make the peace that was denied for 6 years. I mean, I'm not sure. In a way, I belong to them too, and I understand them, and I understand their fears. We have this pogrom complex here, and you can't take it away from us. For 50 or 60 years, we've been fighting for our lives, so it's not simple. And I remember it in 1948. In 1948, I was wounded, and I haven't been in the first few months of the creation of the state, because Jerusalem was cut off from the rest of the country, and Jerusalem didn't have the Israeli government yet. And so we came to Tel Aviv. It's like Purim, you all dress up, but these people become dressed up like policemen, and this one dress up like prime minister, this one dress up like a captain of the army, and they're all playing a game of being a state, but we've never been before. I mean, for years there were British policemen and British government, and we had Ben-Gurion with his fire, and Golda Meir and all these people. There were newspaper editors and writers and so on. I mean, and all of a sudden, they're masquerading to me. I mean, Ben-Gurion is already a prime minister, and...
Ma Israel ad Hashem Elokeinu ad Hashem Echad. Shema 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 Israel ad Hashem Elokeinu ad Hashem Echad. שמע ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד. שמע ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד. ושמע ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד. שמע ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד. שמע ישראל עד השם אלוקינו, עד השם אחד.
על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל, היא מדינת ישראל.
ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שיר העיר אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שיר העיר אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שיר העיר אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל.
I had conversations with Arab intellectuals, colleagues of mine, who asked me why should I be surprised. I mean, it's clear that we're intruders, like the Crusaders at the time. The Crusaders came and managed to stay in this country between 1099 and 1270. The Arabs have patience, but finally they'll get rid of us in the same way that they got rid of the Crusaders at the time. So this state is really just an abscess in the Arab nation, and they have to be cured of it, and therefore every effort is allowed, and they keep trying. The Arabs themselves know in the background that there is in their own history another case which they're terribly afraid of. They call it the tragedy of Andalus. Andalus is Spain, and what they're afraid of is that if they won't keep attacking and do what they're trying to do, one of these days Israel is going to be like Spain, the lost province, which they can never recover again. So what we want, of course, is to be like Spain and not to be like the Crusaders.
I'm really fighting for the rights of the Palestinians, but I spoke to many Arabs, and I have many good Arab friends, and they look at me and says, look, what are you offering me? You're offering me a tiny little state between Hebron and Shechem? Why? Jaffa is my place, and so it's become very complicated. I mean, even if you want to be a very liberal person, and I want to be, and even if I'm against Golda Meir about her dismiss of the rights of the Palestinians, on this division, Palestine will be as big as Long Island. Is this a state for the most intelligent nation among the Arabs? And the Palestinians are the most intelligent, the most advanced, and the most interesting people in the Arab world. Through the suffering and through the contacts with the Jews and Israel for many, many years, I think they developed something that other Arabs don't have. It's not a coincidence that so many of them want to leave. The whole oil embargo is now handled by Palestinian Arabs. I mean, young, bright Palestinian Arabs who are running the oil business in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. But they don't accept it. They want all or nothing. The Jews never understood tragedy. This is why the Greeks invent tragedy and we invent kind of dramas, you know, but never tragedy. I mean, in the Bible there's no tragedy. Because tragedy is when right is opposed to another right. And here is two rights opposing each other. The Palestinian has the full right for Palestine and the Jews have the full right to Palestine. I don't know why, don't ask me why, but they have. Maybe because of Abraham and maybe because of 100 years of effort and maybe because, really, where should we go? I mean, 3 million people to Nebraska, I don't know. It will be nice, but it will be complicated. So there is a right against right, so it's a tragedy. And do you have any solution to a tragedy? No, you don't. It's only possible in Shakespeare, so they all get killed in the end or something. It works in the theater, it doesn't work in life. There's no solution to a tragedy, and this is a tragic situation here.
תגיד לו שיפסיק, לא, אני יודע. היי, תפדלו כולכם לעונג.
The Jewish communities in the diaspora in Europe tended to have the same outlook. Before 1939, they would say it is impossible to imagine that people will be killed. At most, they will be chased away somewhere. They'll be exiled. I mean, the Germans will put in more of these limitations and restrictions on their life. But nobody could think of the final solution. In that sense, to me, it is very clear that the Arabs do think of a final solution. I mean, there is a final solution of Israel. This is called generally the rights of the Palestinian people. That's the elegant, modern way of presenting it. You have an Arab statesman telling you he is ready to come to terms. He will, provided you go back to this border or to the other border, and he's ready to come to make a deal, except that he will still insist on the rights of the Palestinian people. The rights of the Palestinian people is simply the rights they have of this country being Palestine and not Israel, and without the Israelis. That's all. The 1971 Congress of the Palestinian movements put in writing that the definition of which Jews would be allowed to remain in the Palestinian state is those Jews who were in the country before 1917, which is considered to be the beginning of the Zionist conquest.
هذا عنده اخوي سهل عيان.
طيب معلش هذا ممنوع.
تفضل معكم. خلينا يا دكتور عيان.
بابا
هذا كله راح الايه؟
والله مع السلامة.
Arab hatred is some kind of continuation of anti-Semitism, the way we knew it, in more than one sense. Let's first of all think of anti-Semitism in Europe at the time. It was the refusal of society to admit an element which differed from the rest and persistently differed, did not want to assimilate and look like the rest of that society, and was in the way, and you had this pressure of the surroundings on the Jew. And we thought we were solving the problem by creating a Jewish state. So now we have a state which is different from the one around it, and the ones around it. It's an unwanted state by the society of states or of nations in this area, just as the individual Jew was an unwanted element in the society where he lived in the diaspora. The difference is only that a nation can protect itself, can defend itself, and can grow, although even that happened to the individual Jew as well, and he sometime would develop in terms of material strength and in other ways in Europe at the time. Now, another connection with old-time anti-Semitism is the traditional one. Arabs want to make the statement that anti-Semitism existed in Europe and did not exist in the Arab world. That's just a plain lie. The Quran already contains exhortations by Muhammad against the Jews because he had his personal grudge there. He thought they would follow him and they didn't. He got something out of their teachings and he had a good contact with them in the beginning, and then they did not want to recognize him as the prophet. And so he fought them, and early Islam saw the massacre of Jewish tribes in Arabia. The great dynasties of the Almohads in Morocco and southern Spain destroyed Jewish communities there and Jewish life at a certain stage. It is true that before their arrival, between the 8th and the 11th century, there was a beautiful period of Jewish growth under the Muslim rule in Spain. In fact, one of the things that led to a development of Jewish immigration in Israel was the efforts of Sir Moses Montefiore in the beginning of last century. He was an English Jewish magnate. And his visit to the country was caused by a blood libel in Damascus. Just the ordinary blood libel of the slaughter of a non-Jewish child on Easter and Passover. So that anti-Semitism of the traditional type existed, especially in Syria.
I talked to a lot of soldiers. I mean, this war I couldn't fight. I fought in '48, but a lot of people of my generation and a lot of people of the younger generation had seen now one of the worst experiences of their life when, you know, there were a few hundred against, I don't know, thousands and thousands of soldiers, and they saw that it has no end to it. I mean, so and every few years you'll have a war, and every few years a whole generation will be destroyed, and then a new generation will come up and being destroyed. he apparently fought in the 6th War, and or in the War of Attrition anyway, this is his second war. And he came very shaking, I mean, all shaken. He was, I mean, when he talked, he commanded a lot of attention. I felt there was such tension in him. And he said that he comes and speaks for a lot of soldiers that somehow have a feeling that they were, in a way, deceived, not by anyone specifically, but they don't believe anymore a lot of the saying that were so common before, and he wants peace. I mean, he said it in a way that, I mean, not just like you say peace, you know, like, I don't know, Abba Ibn say peace, or Jeremiah or something like that, sort of an eternal peace, but he spoke about no killing anymore. I mean, no children being killed anymore, no.
כואב לך? קצת. תרים את הראש. מה יש? יש סחרחורות. למה יש? אין לי. אנחנו הולכת ללוויה שלו. אני לא יודע, משחקים שום דבר. עכשיו לא בראש שלי שום דבר. תרים את הראש.
That this is the last generation of young people who were killed in this long 50 years war or something. I mean, and when he spoke, I mean, there was absolute silence there, and I felt that he saw, I don't know, the horror, and he came back with such memory that he doesn't want to live through that anymore, and he spoke for a lot of people.
אתה מרגיש בסדר?
כן.
הרגליים. מה? חוט לרגליים. כואב ככה? טיפה.
I'm saying that there must be an end, and I think that this man, when he spoke today, and he said that I'm saying it in the name of many soldiers who never thought about political things before, who were like many Israelis were before the war, sort of living in a plastic world, you know. They have to go to war, they go to war, they have to go to do this, or do that. I mean, you know, the elders always know.
Yeah, עכשיו אני לוחץ, תגיד את השקל לך, כואב?
עכשיו תמשיך.
כואב?
כן.
עכשיו?
לא. מה יש לך?
יש לי כאבי ראש, מה יכול להיות לי? אני אהיה בסדר. עכשיו? עכשיו? אני יודע, כן יודע, לא יודע, אין ברירה. עכשיו אני אסע, איך שיהיה. שמיניות אפילו, אבל להגיע. בסדר? כן. שיהיה לך משהו, תגיד לי.
Here the Israelis and the Egyptians are fighting this 50 years old endless battle in the deserts of Sinai. Who needs this desert? Who cares for this desert? What is it? Sand and so much blood.
The objective treatment here is to return the individual to society and to alleviate the effects of his exposure to wartime conditions and to warfare as such and combat as much as possible by the use of modern psychiatric techniques. Our job is to send him back to his family in a condition as nearly approaching the one that he went into the war. To be able to be a son, a father, a breadwinner, with as little damage done as possible to his functioning as a result of what he's gone through. And his ultimate value to society is most certainly not as a soldier. And the ultimate value to society of any individual is not as a soldier. His main function is to belong to a family unit, to fulfill his obligations at work as far as his relations are concerned, to be able to have satisfaction from what he is doing, and to be able to function efficiently in all fields. The effect of war on some individuals is as such that they lose the power to function through what we could call overstimulation by all the various devices which we all know about, which we've seen in the cinema, in television, in magazines. And the combined effect of all these weapons on the individual is beyond his ability to absorb physically, from the point of view of his mental apparatus. Not everybody is able to be trained to kill. We've come across cases of people who have not fired a shot on principle in the war, people that have actually been wounded themselves and still were not prepared to shoot at another human being. What we actually do is to use chemical substances which are injected into the vein in individuals that we see under examination have undergone certain experiences and have reacted in ways which are fairly typical and fairly well known in the literature. And through this, to put the patient into a mental condition which is not one of full consciousness and is not one of unconsciousness. It's something in between. Under the influence of the injection, we see a complete reproduction of the traumatic event which the individual underwent. In many cases, this starts as soon as we drop the level of consciousness to a mild state of trance. He returns to the battlefield, he talks to his friends, he sees the tanks and the guns and the planes and he hears them, he sees people being killed. The people that are being killed or wounded at the time mean something to him, and he is able, under the treatment, to give full expression to whatever he felt at the time without being distracted from whatever he was doing at that particular moment on the battlefield.
מה? תפסת? תפסתי מה? את הטנק איפה שאני נמצא. הנה, עושה שמאלה. איך אתה מרגיש? גרוע. מה? גרוע. אני לא שומע אותך עכשיו. אני לא שומע. עוד פעם, אני לא שומע. אני לא מרגיש טוב. טוב, בסדר. רק להגיע איך שלא יהיה.
The average treatment under drugs, the individual treatment can be anything from 10 minutes up to an hour or even an hour and a half. But as long as he goes on, we go on observing him and if necessary injecting more of the material or less, or stopping the injection altogether if he has gone into the trance. And he continues in the state of trance for as long as he's got material to bring out. לא שומעים! תוץ מחסה! משה! תוץ מחסה! מגיב!
זה רחוק, חבר'ה, זה רחוק, אין מה לדאוג.
אתה חשוף, תרד למטה! רד למטה, אתה חשוף!
תפגוש, רוצה. تعال مطاح وانا شندواري الجل وانا والله يقولوا أجيبنا شاقي يا البرومو مبي الحمو تبي إسرائيل وش بغيبنا النجمة لما الحكي جلالات وشالات عني جباريات بذرة العظيم يا جبش خان يا سلام أيها أولي البنوري جعل من والنص ما قدرناش صعوديش تعملي بترزع شارعين في البحر أيام ولا يونك ما تدعي